Welcome everyone to Unsheathed Sword Reviews. I'm Vic.
I'm John.
And today we're going to bring you our official review of the LK Chen Regal Soaring Sky Jian. So it should be noted that this is not our sword. This is actually a review sample that has kind of been making its rounds to a bunch of sword tubers. And this was forwarded to us by Andy from Delectric Swords. I believe we're saying that correctly.
We'll find out.
And it was also part of a very awesome prisoner exchange in which he sent us some review samples, some of his own personal swords. We sent him some of our personal swords to get like different people's takes and opinions on that. If you don't know who he is by some crazy reason, check out his YouTube channel. It will be linked in the description below. Awesome guy, super fun, super knowledgeable. Like legitimately, I learn something every time I freaking watch one of his videos or talk to him. Great guy, does lots of really fun testing. Check out his channel.
Yeah, 1000% agree. And there are people that know a lot that aren't necessarily great at sharing that information.
Yeah.
And Andy is both knowledgeable and humble in the way he shares information.
He doesn't make you feel dumb when you ask him when he's explaining something, and like that's the mark of like a great person to me.
He's a credit to this hobby.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. I think he's one of our greatest resources. So
Yes.
definitely check him out if you haven't.
Strongly agree.
Yeah.
So let's look at this, John. So you prefer Chinese swords oftentimes, right? You have a lot of Chinese swords, whereas I kind of lean medieval European.
Mm-hmm.
You also have a Jian that is, I guess, just at a glance similar to this in the white arc that we've already reviewed. Please check out that review.
Yep.
Also, that was literally one of the first batches of reviews we've ever done. So be kind to us. I think we've gotten a bit better since then. It's a little cringe to watch the old videos.
So
you can be the judge. I think we've improved a little bit. However, this is subtly different in a lot of ways, right? So like, would you talk about what this is, this typology, and when it was around, all that kind of stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So this is from the Han Dynasty in China, and that goes from about 200 BC roughly to about 200 AD. So kind of congruent with the early Roman Republic, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's important to think about because as we talk about the technical specifications of this sword, just in your head, you can kind of do some comparisons to like what kind of swords the Romans were using at that time. And I like the technological superiority that the Chinese had at this time is just mind-blowing to me.
So keep in your mind at that point in time, Romans were using swords like this.
Yeah.
Made of iron. Short swords made of iron. And
these are swords that are, this sword in particular is, the blade is what?
35 inches?
35-inch blade. So this would have been a 35-inch, worth mentioning. Take a step back. LK Chen does an amazing job of actually taking swords that were discovered in tombs in China in various places representative of various time periods and making one-for-one replicas of the swords that were found. That's in this case, that's exactly what this sword is. It is a one-for-one replica of a sword that was found in a tomb.
Which is awesome.
Which is amazing. And so these swords in particular were probably like nobleman kind of swords, kind of similar, I think, in a lot of ways to like what somebody in late medieval times, maybe they wouldn't carry their little side sword or small sword into battle, but they might use it when they're walking around in civilian life or as a sign of office when they're in a parade or something like that. But with the function with the focus on functionality and it actually being a combat ready sword, they think that's probably about what these swords were. They were marks of status, they were marks of affluence, and also just really well functioning swords. And so this is based on an earlier dynasty, which is the Chu kind of period, the Chu culture, and they were a Bronze Age civilization that then ended up in the Iron Age towards the end of their influence. And that's where this 8-sided or 8-faced blade that this has, that's sort of a vestige left over from when these swords were made out of bronze. Right. So not the most efficient for cutting, but a lot more structure, which is really good.
Right. So if you don't know, bronze is a pretty soft type of metal. So when you do things like making a hexagonal or an octagonal blade, that's giving you more rigidity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes sense that they would do that for that kind of metal that they were using, right?
Yeah, and Matt Easton talks specifically about it being good to preserve edges because what you end up with when you do that eight sides is you just get a really pronounced bevel, which means it's not going to be as sharp as another sword would be, but it'll be significantly more durable than a narrower, finer blade would be because you hit something with that once, and if it's a softer metal, it's just going to fold or roll or
something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Deform in some way, shape, or form. Right?
Yeah. So that's what this sword's all about. And fit and finish wise, I mean, I think that LK Chen hits the sweet spot for me, fit and finish wise. It is, even though this is a very much like it's a nobleman's sword, One of the things we don't know about those swords is what the cord wrap handles were made out of, because those obviously don't hold up over time. So
they're going to degrade. Yeah.
Probably some sort of organic cord that broke down. But if you look at the White Ark that I have compared to this, everything on the White Ark is simple, utilitarian, whereas a great many things on this are much more ornate and carved and things like that. So
yeah, again, it is, if you're familiar with Chen products, it is like that level of fit and finish, which is to say very good for the price point. You know, this comes in at $415 US dollars. And you know, the cord wrap is nice and tight. I feel like every piece of it feels solid. It feels very sturdy. I think it looks really good. Similar to the White Ark in some ways, but very, very different in a lot of other ways. So I think the fit and finish is on point, and it's good for the price point.
I completely agree with that. I think you get what you pay for and probably some extra.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing to point out is that there is actually ray skin underneath this as well, which is different than the White Ark. The White Ark doesn't have that.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the ray skin popping out right at the top. Talking about, though, the fit and finish and how it's a little bit better than it probably needs to be, this scabbard that it comes with is freaking gorgeous. Kind of like the White Ark and some of the other Jians that they have, but just more ornate. You want to talk about it for a sec?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, if this is the general sword that he's going to wear in the parade and also maybe to fight a duel when he's been drinking, then it makes sense that if it's from the same period as the White Ark and similar, that there would be some similarities, but that it's just a lot more ornate.
Right.
And the same is true with the scabbard. It's the same kind of scabbard.
Lacquered.
That same sort of tree resin lacquer that they use, which I can never remember the name of the tree. But whereas the one that the White Ark is just solid black. It's got the shape. It doesn't have a metal thing here. It's just wood, and there isn't all of this intricate design work on it. So that this is definitely a step up in terms of ornateness.
Yes, this is very, very pretty. As you can probably tell by looking at the wall behind me, I'm not a display my swords in the scabbard kind of guy. However, this is nice enough that I would happily display this in the scabbard. Like, if that's your bag, if that's what you want to do, this looks really good. All this decoration is... I'm the bougie one here on the channel, or so I've been called. Prissy was the word exactly. And I own that, and this is up my alley. I dig this. Like, I want the officer's sword. Like, this is really nice, and I dig the scabbard.
Yeah, I think if I owned this sword, what I would do is I would make a 2-tiered display stand that held the blade up and then put the scabbard underneath it, because I think they go well together and they just accentuate each other really well.
Yeah, because my whole thing is, like, I want to show the blade, because to me that's the money, and especially if something like this that's octagonal, that's very unique, right? You don't see that on a whole lot of swords, and we could use that to transition into the functionality and the handling. It's octagonal for rigidity and thrusting, right?
And for edge retention, for edge protection. And again, it's a vestigial design that would made a lot more sense with bronze than it does with steel.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me personally, using this sword, so you know, this sword is a 35-inch blade, and its grip is 7.75 inches. So in terms of just length, that's about as long as a lot of medieval longswords. That's as long as some medieval longswords that I own. So I have no idea how to use Chinese swords. I know there's a lot more wrist movements and stuff like that in it. However, I just basically use this sword the way I would use a longsword, and that is pretty effective. Like, it still moves really, really well. You can pull off one-handed cuts really easily, because coming in at under 2 pounds, 1 pound 13 ounces is what we measured it. It would be a ridiculously light arming sword. But using two hands, like the amount of like power that you can get, the velocity, like how fast you can get the tip moving is really impressive. I do think it's not quite as good a cutter as like the White Ark and some other Jian, because again, that octagonal section and like you talked about the edge, it doesn't get as many super clean cuts. Still really, really fun, still usable out the box, and just a lot of fun. Like, again, gave this to my girlfriend Deb. You'll see the footage when she was holding it and moving it around, like, for how long it is, how light it is, and again, she's used to European swords because that's what I own. Like, that does not compute in her brain, and then starts cutting and just fell in love with it. So, like, I feel like, again, that's a testament to how fun it is as a backyard cutter.
Yeah,
what did you think?
I completely agree with all that. Again, intentionally, because of the 8-sided blade, it has a steeper bevel at the end, and that's just, again, to protect what would have been a bronze blade initially back in the Chu period. So that's why that's how it is. But it's still, despite having an unideal cross-section for cutting, it still cuts pretty well. It thrusts very, very well. And it's interesting, this blade, I mean, like, honestly, it's almost like a Renaissance rapier blade or a side sword blade.
Yeah.
That's the thing it's closest to out of anything. And you got to figure, that's in the 1500s in Europe. This is from 200 years before the birth of Christ.
Yeah.
Like, that is wild to me, that
insane.
there's a sword that's in any way comparable, blade length and blade quality-wise.
With steel.
with steel,
Yeah.
laminated steel.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So yeah, Vic makes some good points about the handle. Obviously, it handles markedly different than would a complex hilted side sword
Yes.
or rapier because of the fact that there isn't a complex hilt here. Doesn't add a lot of weight there. But what it does do is it gives you a long handle.
Right.
And this is a one-handed sword, so as you can see, there's a lot of handle popping out the back of my hand there, and that does provide a fair amount of counterbalance, which gives you pretty decent tip control.
Yes.
Again, not as like accurate as like a rapier would be, but it's in the same area, in the same world.
Yeah, so if you're not super familiar with like Chinese swords of the style and you lean more European swords, you know, the same way that a single-handed European sword counterbalances with a pommel and a guard, this does that with handle length, right? So this is supposed to be used in one hand, probably with a shield and all that. And it very much can be used in one hand, but you can put two hands on it for fun, and it is a lot of fun when you do that. So
if you put two hands on it, you can get some. It can make some.
It can move.
Cuts.
It can move. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and again, like the center of percussion is pretty far out on this, which is cool. But you can also do like tip cuts and harassing cuts like that and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty good for all those things.
So yeah, as we just talked about, you know, we think it looks good. We think the fit and finish is appropriate for the price, and we think it handles pretty well. So for $415 US, do you think this is worth the price point?
I absolutely think it's worth the price point at $415. I think that, again, it's very unique looking. It's at this price point, you're in competition with a lot of other things that you can get. You can get some pretty decent mid-range European swords for this. We reviewed some, like the Teutonic Arming Sword is somewhere kind of in this price point. You can get some pretty good Japanese swords in this price point, like some katanas that we've recently reviewed. But for me, I think that for this money, you're not going to get something that's more striking and interesting and different looking that represents a cooler part of history than you will with this.
So I think we've talked about this before. Like, we think there are certain quintessential sword types that should be in your collection if you want to. And we've talked about a Jian should be in your collection. I need a Jian. Spoiler alert, I'm going to get one. And it won't be this one. Not because I don't like it, but just because I'm intrigued by another sword that was sent to us in this prisoner exchange with Andy. That will be coming up later. So stay tuned for that. However, I do think this is unique. It's crazy. I love the fact that it's a one-for-one recreation of a historical original. I freaking love that so much. And I don't think you can go wrong. I love the octagonal freaking blade. It's gorgeous. You should buy it. If this piques your interest at all, you should buy it.
And for me, I agree. I think everyone should have at least one Jian. And I think that in general, particularly as you get later in Chinese evolution of swords, I don't like the ostentatious big mushroom pommels that they end up developing later. I love this simplistic feel that like Han Dynasty stuff has. So this is the sweet spot for Jian for me, and unfortunately, LK Chen makes a lot of them.
Yeah, you got some options if this is your solid Jian. Yeah.
So if you don't like this one in particular, because maybe the white cord wrap's not your thing, they have some other ones that have black cord wrap that are similar.
Right.
Magnificent True jumps to mind. So
that one's bougie. I like that one.
That's a good Jian. And really, any of these, I think you would be very happy with. And also, if you look at some other channels that do a little bit more functionality-oriented stuff with the swords, like Sifu Cattell, for example, he talks about how LK Chen swords are actually really good for training Chinese martial arts, and additionally that they sell like replicas of these, like not sharp, for practice. So if you want to practice with a blunt that is the same as your sword, they sell those.
Yes, which is awesome.
Which is amazing.
It's fantastic.
So you don't have any kind of adjustment from your practice sword to your actual sword. So yeah, I can't think of a reason you wouldn't want to buy this. I think it's a really, really good value for the money, and it handles great, and I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, if you're interested in this at all, I don't think you're going to go wrong for the price. So buy it, I think.
Yeah, I'd say buy it, absolutely.
That's all I got, John. Anything else?
That's about all for today. So if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and subscribe for future videos. We've got some fun things coming out down the road here, including some more of our prisoner exchange stuff with Andy. So check that out, and appreciate you watching.
Yeah, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications.
Peace.